Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and these are my quarterback, tight end, and defensive rankings for Week 11. We mixed up the schedule this week. I think we're going to stick with this, and going forward, this video will not include those defensive stats like they have in the past. Those were posted on Thursday in a video devoted to just those stats. Every player is timestamped. If you're interested, that video is up here. All the defensive matchups for every player. But let's talk about the players injured and on bye this week before we begin. At the quarterback position, we have Daniel Jones and Tyler Shuck of the Colts and Saints on bye. Their tight ends are also on bye, so no Tyler Warren, who's a stud. And Juwan Johnson has also looked really good since Shuck has taken over. I think Juwan is a very legit backup tight end to roster. Much more valuable in full PPR. But at quarterback, some injuries to mention. Jackson Dart is out with a concussion. Jaden Daniels is out. Might come back, but probably unlikely if the team keeps losing. CJ Stroud is out yet again with a concussion. He missed last week, so Davis Mills was very effective against Tennessee. Maybe he can play just as well. But Joe Flacco is questionable, I think just because of age, and I assume he plays, but you do want to monitor, make sure he is active by game time. But last piece of news at quarterback, Brock Purdy will come back to the lineup. He will play, and I think he'll have Ricky Pearsall back as well. So that's some positive news. Mac Jones is getting benched. But then at tight end, let's talk about the injuries as well. We already talked about the guys on bye, but Laporta did not practice at all this week. I'm not expecting him to play. I consider him out, but last I checked, he's still questionable. So backup tight end Brock Wright might score a touchdown this week. He will have to step up in his absence. And he did not practice Wednesday, but then was limited on Thursday. I assume Brock Wright will be fine by the time the games happen. But Dalton Kincaid in Buffalo is out, so Dawson Knox gets an upgrade. Harold Fannin was limited all week in practice. I assume he'll be good to go. Dalton Sxhultz didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, but then was limited on Friday. Not 100%. Doesn't have good stats against the Titans. I don't know if this is a game I want to be trusting Dalton Sxhultz. He's not 100%. That's for sure. But a player expected to return from IR is Brenton Strange of the Jaguars. That's definitely an added weapon for them. They need pass catchers right now. So he was limited in Wednesday's practice. I assume he will be activated by Sunday. But Chigo Okonkwo of the Titans was limited all week with a foot injury. And then Ben Sennett, backup tight end in Washington, did not practice Friday with an ankle injury. He's moving in the wrong direction before the Madrid game. So not expecting him to suit up. And I know you're probably like, why would I care about Ben Sennett? He did score a touchdown last week. That was a touchdown taken away from Zack Ertz. So Ertz does become more appealing if Sennett doesn't suit up. But last tight end to mention is also a backup. Daniel Bellinger, limited all week in practice, has been banged up, missed some time as of late. But Darius Slayton is also probably out for this game, didn't practice at all this week. So with Jameis Winston, there's always some added upside in the passing game. Perhaps Bellinger will get some looks. But that's it for the injuries. Before we get going, a quick reminder of the weather. There are 5 games this week with some very legit weather to worry about. In Cleveland, that's probably the worst weather to speak of. It's going to be 44 degrees with light rain and very heavy wind. At least 25 miles per hour, maybe more. And last time we saw similar weather forecasts in Cleveland, that was the Dolphins game where no pass catcher had any value. So that will definitely impact the Ravens and Browns, but it's not the only game to mention. In Madrid, there's some very heavy humidity, 84% humidity in Madrid, 53 degrees with some light rain throughout the game. So if anything, that helps the Dolphins. They're familiar with humidity in Miami. That's an advantage for them. It was last week against Buffalo. So that could be a problem for Washington more than the Dolphins. But in Buffalo, some heavy wind expected, at least 20 miles per hour. Could be much worse than that. But 41 degrees, I think the passing game might be limited. But the quarterbacks are good enough where that game is still probably kind of high scoring. In New Jersey, the Giants are hosting the Packers, and the wind is also very heavy, at least 20 mile per hour winds. Probably profiles as a heavy run game with Jacobs, but Jameis Winston probably doesn't care, probably going to chuck it as much as possible. Last game to mention, this wind is decent in Pittsburgh, but not as bad, around 15 miles per hour. That's relevant, but starting not to care as much. at that speed. So the Steelers and Bengals, that's the last relevant weather to speak of. Otherwise, there's 5 dome games. The Raiders and Cowboys are in a dome. Arizona hosting the Niners is in a dome. The Rams and Seahawks is indoors. So is Minnesota and Chicago, as well as Atlanta and Carolina. 4 games are outdoors, but all perfect weather. Tennessee hosting Houston, Jacksonville hosting the Chargers, Denver hosting the Chiefs, and the Eagles hosting the Lions at night. Weather is not a concern in those games. So those first 5, those are the big problems. Otherwise, weathers should be fine for everyone else. But let's move on. Let's rank the quarterback position. And number 1, I believe, is Justin Herbert this week at Jacksonville. In the last 4 games, the Jags rank as the best quarterback matchup you can find in fantasy, giving up 26 fantasy points per game. And really, you just have to look at the last 2 games versus Geno Smith and Davis Mills. Geno threw 4 touchdowns, albeit one of them was in overtime. And then Davis Mills just dropped 29 fantasy points. He was the best streaming quarterback, like I told you last week. So I'm upgrading every quarterback rest of the season. Versus the Jaguars, it's just the best matchup you can find. And Herbert has been a top 5 quarterback this season, looking like an MVP candidate. I would not bench him, especially given Oronde Gadsden is healthy. The special weakness of the Jags defense is the tight end position. They cannot stop tight ends. So Herbert will dominate. This is a must win. It almost guarantees a playoff spot. If they have the tiebreaker over Pittsburgh and Jacksonville, they are at worst a wildcard team. So Herbert going to play lights out. I'm starting him in the subscriber league, and I assume the stats will lead to him being the best QB on the week. Absolutely start Justin Herbert. I told you to start Drake Maye last night, and maybe if Travion Henderson didn't have 2 rushing touchdowns, his stats might have looked better. They did not dominate the Jets as much as I expected. But against the Jets, it was definitely not a matchup you were worried about. I was just overestimating the Patriots passing game on Thursday night. So he let me down a little bit, didn't go over 20 points, but didn't completely burn you. I benched him for Herbert in the subscriber league, and at least I was willing to do that. But Drake Maye at number 2 looks a little high in hindsight. Number 3, I think, is Caleb Williams at Minnesota. The Vikings defense has been pretty porous lately. In the last month, it ranks as a top 10 matchup. They're allowing just shy of 21 fantasy points per game, and Caleb Williams is playing really well. If you look at his 3 career games versus Minnesota, he's averaging 22.9 fantasy points in a regular 4-point passing league. 247 yards per game, 5 total touchdowns, no interceptions, and also an average of 31 on the ground. So even though he lost to the Vikings in week 1, he still played pretty well in fantasy, and he's also been lighting it up lately. This game has no weather to worry about, and the Vikings have been a top 10 matchup lately. I'm going to start Caleb Williams with some confidence. I do not think this is a low-scoring game. I think it's more likely a shootout. I even think McCarthy plays well on offense. I think the Bears' defense doesn't play well, and Caleb does step up. The Ben Johnson offense really playing well this year. So like Caleb Williams, I would start him this week as a top 3 play overall. Number 4, we're going Jalen Hurts versus Detroit. Not much to say here. Hurts is always contributing on the ground, and the Lions are a top 10 matchup as well. Hurts should put up at least 20 points in this matchup. That's what the Lions are allowing on average last 4 games. So especially with no weather concerns, Hurts should be great. The Lions secondary is not going to be that big of a deal. I think even AJ Brown will contribute. So like Jalen Hurts, the floor is always locked in to your lineup. He's a no-brainer, must start as always. Number 5, Dak Prescott at Las Vegas. I believe this offense will bounce back. The Raiders defense did kind of shut down Bo Nix, but that was in division on Thursday. Wind was a factor. This game is indoors, and the Cowboys are coming off a bye. So Lamb and Pickens gonna torch them. The Raiders are good at stopping tight ends, so maybe not Jake Ferguson contributing heavily, but the only path for Prescott to really shit the bed is if he gets blown out and the defense really plays well like Arizona did. I don't expect that to happen this week. Or if Javonte Williams vultures him with 3 touchdowns. I doubt that happens. Dak is a very safe play in general. Sometimes a low floor, but this week a very high ceiling. Versus Las Vegas, I'm definitely starting him. Put Dak in the lineup. But next player on the list is dropping down a tier, and we do have the Rams-Seahawks game back-to-back with both quarterbacks. I think that game could be a shootout, but in division, sometimes they're not as high scoring as some people expect. This could be even better than that Buccaneers Seahawks game earlier in the season, but both defenses have looked legit at times. If you look at the last 4 games for Matthew Stafford versus Seattle, they're not that impressive for fantasy purposes. An average of 267 yards per game, that's pretty good, but only 5 passing touchdowns and 1 interception. That's an average of 15.2 points. We know he doesn't contribute on the ground, and if the Seahawks secondary is fully healthy this week, they can definitely limit you a little bit. So Stafford's been an MVP candidate. I still want to start him. But because I picked the Seattle Seahawks to win, I think Darnold is a better play. I have them back-to-back, both top 7. I want a piece of this game wherever I can get it. But the average stats for Stafford against this Seahawks defense aren't great, and that's why I have him 1 spot behind Sam Darnold. But with Darnold, it's just a question of will he get sacked or not. Last time we saw him face the Rams, it was with the Vikings, and their offensive line was kind of depleted. He got sacked like 9 times in that game. Looked terrible. So as long as he has time to throw it, I expect him to be great. JSN is elite. I think Cooper Kupp could be a major revenge game candidate. Might have a great game from Cooper Kupp here. And then Shaheed offers that deep threat capability. Torrey Horton didn't practice yesterday, so might not play, but if he does, that's another component. Their tight ends also contribute. I like Darnold a lot. I think Darnold and Stafford will go back and forth and offer some high upside. I don't think the defenses will dominate. I think it's more likely a high scoring game. So I want both in my starting lineup. I like Darnold at number 6 and Stafford at 7. Unless you have the top 5, I would start them. At number 8, I got Patrick Mahomes at Denver. And in his last 4 games versus the Broncos, he does not play very well. An average of 17.4 points per game, 285 passing yards. That's nice, but 5 touchdowns total and 4 interceptions. That is not good at all. The Broncos defense knows how to limit him, at least in fantasy. That's not very good. He does offer 20 rushing yards, and this week I think that's kind of the only saving grace. With Pacheco probably sidelined, he's going to have to contribute. He will probably lead the team in rushing yards. So that's going to be the only major floor component where I am still trusting Mahomes, but I'm significantly downgrading him. I don't think he's the safe start you might expect. Based on his schedule rest of season, he probably doesn't finish the year as the QB1, but going into this game off the bye, he is still the quarterback 1 in points per game, so got to give him some credit. I think there's higher shootouts though elsewhere. That's why I rank Stafford higher than him, despite even worse divisional stats against Seattle. But Mahomes, I think, is not going to have to drop 30 points to win. This is going to be a low scoring game from both sides in my expectation. So I think the rushing yards will be fine, but otherwise don't expect multiple passing touchdowns. That's usually not what happens against Denver. So Mahomes, not at the top of the ranks. At number 8, I'm still starting him though. And then at number 9, I would start Joe Flacco. He's been lights out since taking over. I got to keep starting him. Last time he played Pittsburgh was in week 7, and he had 3 touchdowns, 342 passing yards, 25 plus points. Last time he faced off against Pittsburgh, their secondary's been pretty bad this year, and perhaps the Steelers defense does really play well at home. Their season's kind of on the line. The division is at stake with Pittsburgh every single game moving forward. So they might really step up. They might look like shit. Last time they looked like shit, and I would probably still trust Joe Flacco because of his weapons. But I could see him throw some bad interceptions here. We saw Daniel Jones have 5 turnovers last time he played the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. That was a pretty impressive defense. So Flacco might let you down, but I think the yardage will cover you. And odds are the touchdowns also hit as well. So even if he has 2 interceptions, who cares? I think Flacco will be top 10. He's been so good. I don't think you can rank him outside the top 12. That'd be the lowest. But the reason I have him at number 9 is because I'm really fading 3 real studs at quarterback. I usually rank higher. I have Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, and Lamar Jackson at 10, 11, and 12. And weather is such a big factor in these games. I have to lower expectations. I honestly want to rank them much lower, but based on name value, based on just who they are, they're all MVP candidates. Still have to give them the benefit of the doubt. I can't rank them too low. But there are instances when Allen really lets you down. Baker sometimes doesn't really produce. And those two guys are going up against each other in some bad weather. I mentioned it earlier. The wind is going to be very, very much a factor, and that will limit the passing game. No doubt about it. Allen also doesn't have his best weapon, Dalton Kincaid. Baker, we know, doesn't have Godwin or Mike Evans, so his upside's a bit capped. Hasn't been quite as good since Evans went down with the collarbone. And Baker is probably going to keep up with Josh Allen, but it's possible this game is a pretty low scoring one. I don't know if the weather will really limit those offenses enough. But there's also the flip side where this game could be 40-38. Wouldn't shock me either. Both offenses have that capability because of these quarterbacks. So can't outright bench him, but if you told me you had a great streaming option like Joe Flacco, I would bench them for that guy. So if you have Herbert as the backup, definitely go Herbert. I think Caleb has more upside. I like Dak with no weather to worry about. The Rams-Seahawks game has higher upside. You probably didn't draft Mahomes and Allen at the same time. So just go with Allen if you're looking at anybody else I didn't mention that I haven't ranked in the top 10. But I also would not expect 30 points out of Allen this week. It's unlikely that that happens. But Baker, I think, will have a similar stat line to him. I think he will keep up, not contribute on the ground as much, but still have top 12 numbers. The floor, I think, will still be safe. You're not going to get completely burned if you go with Allen or Baker Mayfield. So the safety net is why I'm still starting them, and that applies to Lamar Jackson as well. But the Browns matchup is bad. The Browns are really good at stopping quarterbacks this season. Last 4 games, quarterbacks are averaging less than 13 fantasy points against the Browns. The weather's also the worst of the week, so have to bring him down the rankings. Like I said with Flacco, if that's your backup, I'd just go Flacco instead of Lamar Jackson. I'd like to avoid this bad weather. It really derailed the road team's offense last time a team came into Cleveland. But the Dolphins are a much different roster than Baltimore. In division, they could still play lights out. And if you look at his career track record versus Cleveland, he does still put up great numbers. Last 4 versus them, an average of 21.7. Kind of low in the yardage department, but he's never really elite in that regard. 41 rushing yards really covers you. 9 total touchdowns, 2 interceptions, last 4 games. But if you take away one of those touchdowns this week, I could consider the upside kind of capped. I'm expecting about like 17, 18 points from Allen, Baker, and Lamar. I'm not convinced they go over 20, but I don't think they ever even sniff less than 16. 16, I think, is guaranteed with all 3, but I don't think they go over 20 points. So maybe you'll look for upside elsewhere. Now we're entering the streaming conversation, and I would definitely start these guys in 2 quarterback leagues, but odds are with only 2 teams on bye, only Daniel Jones unavailable, you may not feel bold enough to look to these guys on the wire. But Jaden Daniels is out, so is CJ Stroud, so is Jackson Dart. Maybe you need a backup. Perhaps that is the case. So my favorite streaming option, if you don't have Joe Flacco this week, is Tua Tagovailoa, a quarterback you can still get off the wire and gets the elite matchup this week. I would be chasing. We saw Goff play fantastic last week against Washington. Darnold lit them up. And although Tua maybe isn't as good as those quarterbacks, he's not that much worse. When you can't stop him, he can definitely torch you. So he's been playing well. He played really well against Buffalo last week. He also dominated the Falcons recently. Tua's been looking impressive, and Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins, I think, are all playing for their job. They have nothing to lose. So this Commanders matchup is fantastic. Top 3 in the last month, top 4 on the year. And I would expect over 20 points from Tua. But because it's Tua, because the humidity is a factor in this one, there is a chance that just the Madrid variables could lead to a bad game. I could also see you get burned, but I think there's also elite upside. So if there's one player I think could fucking smash these rankings and even be top 5 when the week is over, this week, my upgrade off the wire is Tua. He is my version of Davis Mills this week. I ranked Davis Mills at 13 last week against Jacksonville. Give me Tua against Washington at number 13 at the position. Very high upside for Tua, and I think there's no corner that will pick him off unless he throws just an egregious turnover. I think he can keep that stat clean. I don't think he'll cough it up in this one. So give me Tua. The Commanders secondary is just such a joke. I love Tua against Washington. Next up in the ranks is Brock Purdy at 14 at Arizona. He also kind of gets limited in this division rivalry, but also offers a really high floor. Mac Jones has looked amazing, and we consider Purdy a much better quarterback than Mac Jones. So this is great for George Kittle. Purdy loves him, and Juwan Jennings might get a boost as well, but I don't see the offense being that much different than what it would have been with Mac Jones. But Purdy does scramble a little extra if his toe injury is fully healed. An extra 2 points on like 20 rushing yards should be expected. And that's why I think he will be more valuable than Mac Jones. So I think he's top 15 this week. Let's see how healthy he is before we like fully lock him in. However, earlier this year, he did win a game against Arizona, 16-15. That wasn't elite. And if you look at his last 4 games against them, only an average of 16.8 fantasy points. He never gives you like elite yardage against Arizona. They can limit him in that regard. He averages just about 235 in terms of passing yards per game against the Cardinals, but 9 touchdowns, only 2 picks last 4 games. He should throw a touchdown to Kittle and Juwan this week. However, Christian McCaffrey has been diminishing in terms of production last couple games. That's the only variable that might burn you, but against Arizona, I think he'll be fine, especially if their secondary misses the game for the second week in a row. Purdy is a safe floor play at the very least, but I'm really interested in JJ McCarthy this week. I kind of wanted to rank him much higher than this, and he is going to be active. He was questionable, didn't practice Wednesday, but he is off the injury report. He is good to go at home against Chicago, and this matchup is great for him. It ranks top 5 on the season. The Bears defense only stops the run, but if you're a quarterback scrambling, they don't really have an answer for that either. Jackson Dart really lit them up in the run game last week. So McCarthy, I think, will contribute, keep the ball moving with his legs. And then there's also some great historical stats for Jefferson in this game. The Bears secondary is not scary. If he can pass the ball well, then JJ McCarthy has lead upside. But I think the floor at the very least is very safe, pretty bust proof. The Bears matchup would suggest he has a 20-point projection incoming in this matchup. The Bears defense not scary whatsoever. There's also no weather. I like JJ McCarthy as a decent streamer, but if I can get my hands on Tua, I'd rather go with Tua over McCarthy. Geno Smith comes in at 16, and it feels really gross to rank him this high, but he really paid off in a big upgrade against Jacksonville 2 weeks ago, and this is a major upgrade against Dallas. This is the best matchup on the season. The Cowboys are coming off a bye, but on the year they're allowing 24 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That is by far the most that any matchup has to offer. So I have to rank Geno higher. I just have to do it. Bauer's going to dominate. I think the Broncos just know how to limit you. Their defense is so much better than Dallas. Cowboys not going to have an answer. And similar to that Jaguars matchup, I could see Bowers score 3 touchdowns. I really could off the mini bye week. Geno Smith should be healthy enough to contribute. He looked really banged up in primetime on Thursday. However, I think he'll be good on Monday in this matchup. It's a home game. Unless Genty just vultures all the touchdowns, I think Geno has a lead upside in this matchup. The Cowboys are the best matchup you can get, so I got to rank him in the streaming conversation. Every Cowboys opponent gets an upgrade worth starting. Aaron Rodgers is also an interesting streaming option this week. The Bengals game was really good for him back in week 7. He had 22 points. He had 250 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, though. This week, I think the interceptions will not happen. I think the touchdowns, at least 2, maybe 3. And if it's 4 again, then you'll be ecstatic if you start Rodgers. But he's old. He looked really old last week. And this offense is still just kind of sad. So not elite. The Bengals are a great matchup, but against Rodgers, I think it's wasted. But it has offered 25 points per game in each of the last 4 on average. There is a chance that Rodgers plays lights out. But at his age, I just wouldn't expect it. The yardage is definitely capped this year with Rodgers. So probably going to pass on him at 17. Got to be in a super flex league to consider it. Odds are you can get Geno off the wire above Aaron Rodgers. So that's my recommendation. Give me Tua, McCarthy, and Geno off the wire before I go Rodgers. But I'd still rather go Rodgers than Bo Nix. The Bo Nix experience is so hard to predict, so up and down. Last week looked so fucking bad, and I just don't trust him. I really don't. His only legit game against Kansas City, when they actually had their starters on the field, he only put up 16 points last year in a very close game. I expect a similar close matchup this time. He threw for 215, had -5 rushing yards, did have 2 passing touchdowns and no interceptions. However, 16 points is still not good enough to move the needle. So although he's had some elite upside, it's all come in the fourth quarter, and I could see the Chiefs defense just shut him down all game. He not have any production worth counting on. So I just need to see some level of consistency with Knicks before I start him. This Chiefs matchup is a downgrade, ranks bottom 12, and I'm not going to rank him any higher than 18, but still the last decent start, I would still project for at least 16 plus points. The floor I think is still fine with Bo Nix, but the rest of the way, I'm not too excited about the upside with these guys. I think there is some risk factoring in. The floor is still kind of safe for the next few players. However, I'd probably just be benching them, especially in a one quarterback league. Davis Mills gets the start again, played lights out last week, but I don't think he'll play as well against Tennessee. The Jags matchup is way, way better. Tennessee's a top 12 matchup. It's not bad. He should be fine, but I just don't think he'll have that rushing upside like he did last week. And I also don't think he has Dalton Sxhultz, perhaps not at full strength in this game. So Davis Mills, not going to play elite in back-to-back games, but does rank top 20, is interesting in Superflex. Jacoby Brissett is not ranked as high because of the loss of Marvin Harrison Jr. He's out, so Brissett loses some upside. And then Mariota has some rushing value, but against Miami in the humidity, I could see that be a problem. I'm not 100% sure if Mariota will play well in that weather. With no Terry, the upside's lower. His rushing stats are really the only compelling argument to be starting Mariota. But the Dolphins defense has actually kind of played well at times. There is some lack of upside here. The Dolphins in the last 4 games have actually held quarterbacks to under 15 fantasy points. They're actually pretty good on defense lately. So Mariota, I think, has limited upside. I will bench him before the bye week. I think you can drop him. I wouldn't worry about not being able to get him back. And I don't think the upside is there this week. So I'll bench him. No thanks on Mariota. I'm also going to bench Jared Goff. I know I ranked him top 5 last week, but Goff is a player I want to pick my spots with, and I don't trust him to be lights out against the Eagles. This defense does not compare to Washington. Last week was just such a good matchup. Don't chase the points, believe the matchups, and the Eagles looked amazing on defense against Green Bay last week. Their defensive line will give them some problems. With no Laporta, there's also diminished upside a lot. I think they're going to lean on the run in this matchup. Goff might play well with his throws to Jameson Williams, but without that, I think he'll get burned. Goff has low upside. I think this is a game where he only gives you a maximum 16 points with limited touchdowns. So no thanks on Goff. I don't see many yards this week. Trevor Lawrence, I'm worried about, needs some rushing stats to contribute. All his receivers are banged up, but it looks like Brian Thomas Jr. is coming back to the lineup. He is practicing, so that does help. But the Chargers are a terrible matchup. They rank bottom 4 against quarterbacks averaging 10 points per game allowed in the last 4. So definite downgrade to Trevor Lawrence. An important game for both teams, but I just don't trust their offense given their injuries as of late. This Chargers matchup looks a bit difficult, but at least weather's not a problem. The floor is still probably at least 14, 15 points in this tier. But Jordan Love, I think, will be a low upside play this week. Some injuries at receiver. It looks like Dobbs will be healthy, but still not 100% there. With no Tucker Kraft, the upside's down. And then the weather's bad in this game. There's some rain and decent wind. I think they're going to hand it off like crazy. The matchup's so much better for Jacobs. I don't see much value on Jordan Love this week. But maybe against Jameis Winston, he has to go toe-to-toe and throw heavy. Jameis could torch you. He's a gunslinger. So I do have Jameis Winston one spot below Jordan Love, but back-to-back, I think the tier is much different. And odds are I'll just leave Jameis on the waiver wire, given he's just a one-week fill-in, while Dart has a concussion. But the matchup isn't terrible. However, the pick sixes don't burn you too much. The game script's so much better after the pick 6. Honestly, Jameis has a lead upside, but I think I'll pass, given it's the first game we've ever seen him with the Giants, an interim coach, and no Darius Slayton or Malik Neighbors. That's some low upside in this matchup. But Jameis still is tempting, not gonna lie. But Justin Fields, I underestimated his contributions in the run game last night, so ranked him at 26. That's definitely lower than where he will finish, but I don't regret it. When Fields has a bad game, it's terrible, and I assume that the Patriots defense would stop him. That first drive was pretty good, and then only one other good drive. He still turned it over, like I thought. But Fields probably finishes higher than this. The ranking does look a bit too low in hindsight. But then Michael Penix versus Bryce Young. Despite no weather, I am not excited about this offensive matchup. I think it's more so a run game between Bijan Algier versus Rico Dowdle. And I just don't trust the quarterbacks very much. I do prefer Penix, though. At least he has London, but not good matchups for either. I will definitely bench both of them. I think they're bottom 5 this week at the position. But Cam Ward versus Houston has done nothing. So against the Texans, it's a terrible matchup. Not going to trust him at all. He had a 0 on the scoreboard last time he faced off against Houston. And then Dylan Gabriel versus Baltimore. The weather is no joke. Definitely bench Dylan Gabriel. So those are my quarterback rankings. Let's move on. I'll show you the full list at the end of the video. Let's move on to tight end, where I mentioned some injuries with Tucker Kraft, Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid. None of them are available this week. Neither is Tyler Warren and Juwan Johnson, who's actually pretty legit last 2 games with Tyler Shuck. So the position's actually kind of depleted this week. Kind of unfortunate at tight end, but the top 3 are no-brainers based on where you drafted them. They are living up to expectation. I know Bowers played like shit last week, but he should bounce back heavy. The Cowboys defense, not the same, but I genuinely consider Trey McBride as the best option. With no Marvin Harrison Jr., his target share will be even more elite. And if you look at his last 4 games versus San Francisco in the first place, he is averaging 13.1 points per game against them. And always his problem in fantasy is the lack of touchdowns. He actually has 2 touchdowns against the Niners in that span. So he scores touchdowns on San Francisco. He's also scored 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games with Brissett. McBride is playing lights out. I think he's the tight end 1 this week. The volume might go over 15 targets. If you told me he gets 20, I'd be a bit surprised, but not entirely shocked. With no Marvin Harrison Jr., Brissett will funnel it to McBride. This might be the best tight end game of the season for McBride against San Francisco. But Bowers at number 2, still going to respect Bowers. 2 weeks ago when he had 3 touchdowns is enough of a reason not to worry, despite last week's bad game. Like I mentioned, the Cowboys defense doesn't compare to Denver, so he'll be lights out. Got to start him. George Kittle gets Brock Purdy back, so he'll play very well. But if you look at his last 4 games versus Arizona, if not for the touchdowns, he's not giving you a lot of yardage. They limit him to 6 targets per game, 3.8 receptions per game, and only 39 yards per game, but 3 touchdowns in those last 4 games, an average of 10.3 points per game. He will be great. He was amazing last week. I think he'll be fine, but I don't think he's better than McBride or Bowers this week. But still in the same tier. The upside's still higher than anyone else with McBride, Bowers, and Kittle. But this next tier, these next 3, I think are all locks in the lineup. There is no chance I'm benching them. Oronde Gadsden gets an elite matchup this week. I brought it up in the matchup video. Gadsden against Jacksonville is such a big upgrade. They're allowing 22 points per game to the position in each of the last 4 games on average. So I think Gadsden's going off. I think his yardage will be insane. A big reason why I rank Herbert at number 1 is because of this matchup for Gadsden. So he'll be lights out this week. I think he could also finish as tight end 1, but he did get banged up last week. There was a question mark if he would even play in this game. So for those reasons, with a slight injury risk, let's put him at 4, but the upside is truly elite against Jacksonville. Dallas Goedert has had amazing upside at times, and against Detroit, there's always a chance that A.J. Brown doesn't contribute. I would expect this game to be a bit more high-scoring than a low-scoring one. So Goedert probably finds the end zone. I think he'll contribute heavy, so I like Goedert. I think he's a safe start. But then Travis Kelce at Denver plays really well in this division matchup. He actually averages 12.5 points per game in his last 4. But he's not the same player this year. We know at his age, sometimes it's just not the same experience as it was 4 years ago. But still, I would expect heavy contributions from him. I think he'll play well. And whenever he's active, he's been a good tight end worth starting this season. So definitely at worst top 10, but with all the injuries this week, I think he's clearly top 6. I don't think there's any argument to be making why you would bench Travis Kelce. So definitely start him. I think he'll give you at least 10 points. But then the remaining tight ends at the position this week are mainly streaming options. I don't feel as safe with them. But we're still in the top 10 with these next 3 in this tier. I think you got to keep him in the lineup. But we got Colston Loveland at Minnesota, who's playing lights out right now, and the Vikings defense is really bad. The Vikings are a good matchup at the moment. They rank top 10. They're allowing 13.6 points per game to the position on average last 4 games. So I like the upside this week for Loveland. The injuries at receiver are kind of concerning. Last 2 games, they've been using either Rome or DJ Moore as a decoy. Both have a bagel the last 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Loveland has been popping off. So I think he has league-winning upside rest of the season. I would try and acquire him if he's somehow still available off the waiver wire or via trade. And I think he's legit. They drafted him top 10 above Tyler Warren. I think they plan to use him a lot. This is a good matchup for him. I like Loveland a lot in this matchup. Top 7 for Colston Loveland in week 11. Number 8, I have Theo Johnson versus Green Bay, and Darius Slayton is probably not going to play. So despite the weather concerns, Jameis Winston offers elite upside to his pass catchers, and Theo Johnson might get the most targets, is at worst number 2 behind Wan'Dale Robinson. So I see really high upside for Theo this week. He's been a good tight end this year with very high upside. Even though Dart isn't the quarterback, I trust Jameis Winston to get him the ball. The Packers matchup is not bad. This year, it ranks top 11. So Theo Johnson, elite upside, I would start him as a top 10 play. And same with Jake Ferguson, but the matchup has me concerned. I would have ranked him as a locked-in top 5 option if not for the matchup. But Las Vegas on the season is allowing bottom 3 numbers, very few touchdowns to the position. On average, you're only getting about 6.5 points at tight end versus the Raiders per game. So I'm lowering expectations. I don't know if it'll be that bad, but based on who he is and how long you've been trusting him, I think you're still starting him. There's a lot of players inactive this week at tight end, so he still ranks top 10. But if you told me there were no teams on bye, everyone was healthy, I'd probably have him as low as like number 14, 15. I'm actually really worried about the upside of Jake Ferguson this week. But it's the Cowboys offense. Let's trust him. I think he'll be fine, but not as good. But these next 8 players are all in the same tier, and I believe they're all the best streaming options. You can make an argument that every single one of them has higher upside than even Jake Ferguson in a tough spot. But I think unless you have those top 9, these are players I'm not considering whatsoever. However, I still think they have an interesting floor, a different path for success, whether it's matchup or just situation. I think they have some value in week 11. At number 10, I have Zack Ertz at Miami. Love the matchup for Zack Ertz. It ranks top 4 on the year. And in the last 4 games, they're allowing 17.7 points per game to the position. So last week, we saw a bit of a committee with the Commanders tight end. John Bates got going. So did Ben Sinnott. He scored a touchdown. But Sinnott is probably inactive this week. He didn't practice on Friday. I would expect Ertz to be a heavy contributor in terms of target share. I like Ertz a lot. So good matchup, good upside, and he has played well in the past at times. So no Terry McLaurin, definitely no concern. I would upgrade Ertz as a good option in week 11, a top 10 tight end, just barely. But at 11, I'm really worried I'm ranking Cade Otton way too high. The matchup against Buffalo is the worst on paper. They allow less than 5 points per game, and the weather is dog shit. But if you look at the last few games for Otton, his track record's really good. The yardage is always there. The touchdown is not hitting, but since Evans has gone down, he is a constant in this offense. So I still trust Baker enough to kind of negate some of those downgrades. I still think Otton's good enough, but I am a bit worried. If not for all the injuries and buys this week at the position, I wouldn't rank Otton anywhere near this high. He literally moves up 5 spots because some other players are taken out. So good luck with Otton. I think you'll need it, but at 11, I guess he's still in the lineup in a 12-team league. And then at 12, I did have Hunter Henry as a legit streaming flex option last night. And it wasn't amazing. The touchdown didn't work out, but with no Kayshon Boutte, it was worth a swing. He still had 6.5 points on 45 yards and 4 receptions. So at tight end, that's the floor. That's the minimum you can get and still feel good. It's like as if he had 1 touchdown catch and nothing else. So not great, but not going to complain too much. At tight end, that's fine. The bar is much lower. So tight end 12 in my ranks, that call looks fine. Not terrible. Not amazing, but maybe he finishes lower on the week. Dawson Knox, I think, has some touchdown upside against Tampa Bay, filling in for Kincaid. He's definitely the guy I would rather have. But Jake Haws, however you pronounce his name, I think also contributes enough to be a bit worried. I don't know exactly what'll happen with Knox. The weather's bad, and you're just hoping for a touchdown. But against Tampa Bay, it's not a terrible matchup. It ranks bottom 12, but Knox will definitely get more targets with no Kincaid. But Evan Ingram, I think, is a good floor play as well. Going to have similar value to Hunter Henry this week. The Chiefs matchup's actually decent lately. They're allowing over 12.5 points per game in the last 4 weeks. So maybe Ingram can capitalize, but in general, he doesn't score touchdowns, just a floor play for like 5-6 targets. And Ingram should be safe from a floor standpoint, but I don't think the upside is really there. Dalton Sxhultz, I'm worried about because of the injury status. He didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. Limited Friday means he probably suits up, but it's not a guarantee. He's a game time call and definitely not 100%. And then this matchup against Tennessee isn't amazing. It's not an upgrade, that's for sure. And if you look at his last 4 games versus Tennessee, he is averaging only 4 points per game as a member of Houston, an average of 25 yards per game, no touchdowns. I don't think he's the best play given he's injured and maybe won't even suit up against Tennessee. The upside, I think, is capped. This feels like a big Woody Marks game, not a Dalton Sxhultz game, in my opinion. So still top 15 because of all the injuries this week, but it's just his recent success last few weeks why I'm interested. Otherwise, I would definitely bench him if I could. The injury, I think, is a big problem. Pat Freiermuth, though, a very interesting flex play to upgrade. The Bengals matchup is so good, and it's the best one you can find. He had 2 touchdowns in week 7 against the Bengals, so if anyone is proof that this is a good matchup, it's him. However, it's not destined to be the same outcome. It's not a guarantee that'll repeat. So maybe you get 1 touchdown, maybe it goes to Geno Smith. I could be picking wrong. Problem in Pittsburgh, even in a good matchup like this, is which tight end will play well. It could be Darnell Washington who gets the touchdown, but it's probably Freiermuth. I think he has the main upside we're looking for. In terms of yardage, he does have the highest upside down the field. So at tight end 16, probably going to leave him on the bench. I'd rather go Dawson Knox, but I might be ranking him way too low. You could tell me he's better than Cade Otton this week, and I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever. Greg Dulcich, I think, also factors in. The matchup against Washington is top 5. In the last 4 games, it actually ranks top 3. The Commanders are allowing 19 points per game on average to tight ends. So this is a very, very good spot. We saw Goff torched them last week, Darnold the week before, and I think Tua is going to play really well. The humidity's a problem in Madrid, but the Dolphins play in humidity all the time. I think they'll be fine, and Dulcich does contribute. This matchup is great for tight ends. I would be ranking Waller top 10 if he was active, but Waller is out. Julian Hill, another backup tight end, is also out, and then Tanner Connor is irrelevant. Dulcich is the tight end who gets the starting job in Miami. So for one game only, I think he's an interesting plug and play, but mainly only in DFS. I think it's a bit too bold to start Dulcich, but if you start him, I think a touchdown is definitely possible. It's in the cards. The volume could be there for all Miami pass catchers this week, Dulcich included. So I'd rather play it safe with Freiermuth. I think Dawson Knox is also more tempting. If you can get Zack Ertz off the wire, go Zack Ertz. Maybe you're too desperate. Maybe those guys are taken. At 17, I think Dulcich is interesting, an interesting flyer if you're desperate. But 18 through 21, I'm going to bench these guys. I like the upgrade for Noah Fant, but just don't fully trust him. Fant feels a bit too cute here. I'll pass. Jonnu Smith versus Cincinnati might be the right play. I only have him 3 spots below Freiermuth, but Freiermuth is my preference, so we'll fade Jonnu off the wire. And then Terrence Ferguson is my preference in the Rams tight end core, but they use all 4. They get a great matchup against Seattle. Sadly, it feels wasted because I don't feel confident in betting on the right one. But if there is one that has value, it's the 2nd round pick, Terrence Ferguson. The rookie is who I like most. But Brenton Strange comes back from IR. The matchup's not great. Well, let's give it 1 week for Strange in this offense before we tell you to start him. But at 21, he's on my radar. Andrews in bad weather, I'll bench outright. AJ Barner, I'm also going to bench. I don't love the matchup, and it could go to Arroyo. And Luke Musgrave, I will also bench. I don't like the weather in this matchup. Not a +1 either. And then Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson, don't like the matchup. I'm also benching Njoku and Fannin in the heavy wind. Okonkwo with a foot injury. Tyler Higbee and Mason Taylor also outside the top 25. But that's it for tight ends. Let's wrap up this video with defenses. And the top 3 I thought were no-brainers, but perhaps I missed on the Patriots. They weren't as good as I thought. And at least in the Blunt League, they did give you 8 points. So that is a good floor. I'm not going to complain about it, but it wasn't as high of a ceiling as I expected. But I see the elite ceiling still there for the Ravens at Cleveland. The weather's terrible and the Browns offense is dog shit. So I would 100% start the Ravens this week. If you have any start-sit questions involving the Ravens, I will tell you to go Baltimore. But Texans also a no-brainer. Could be the defense number 1 this week. The Titans are the best matchup possible, but then they're coming off a bye. Maybe they play a little bit better. It looks like Ridley might suit up. And then the Texans in division maybe don't force enough turnovers, maybe don't have that pick 6 upside that you're looking for. But they're elite. They're definitely top 3 at the worst. This is the lowest ranking I could give you on the Texans. But the weather was worse against the Browns. And then I like the Jets matchup a lot too. So perhaps both of them are better than the Patriots this week. Most likely that is the case. But on the weekend on Sunday, I would definitely be starting Ravens at Cleveland and Texans at Tennessee. The next 3 I think are also good starts this week. Elite upside for the Packers. Anytime you face off against Jameis Winston, you would expect at least 1 pick 6. So they probably have elite upside, but there's also a world where Jameis plays well. Sometimes he gives you a lot of garbage time yards that do take away from your fantasy points at defense. So I don't think it's the same tier as Ravens and Texans, but perhaps even higher upside. And then the Falcons versus Carolina, they can't really stop the run, so Rico Dowdle should play well. That could be a problem, but otherwise, you like this Panthers matchup. I like the Falcons defense a lot. These next 3 games, their schedule is fantastic. So they'll be a good start for the next 3 weeks. I guarantee it. I will be ranking them top 10 in these next 3 games. And then the Chargers at Jacksonville look pretty tempting. They have played very well on defense as of late. Ever since getting Khalil Mack back on the defensive line and getting a bit healthier overall on that side, Jesse Minter's defense has stepped up. Last few games, they did really shut down the Steelers offense. So Jags at home could be a problem, but other than ETN, they're pretty banged up and their offense I think is a bit capped. In this game, I see the upside being decent and the floor being very safe. I think the Chargers are a top 10 play, but Browns versus Baltimore also benefit from the win. So I don't think the Ravens offense will be a juggernaut this week. I think the Browns will step up in division at home. Going to be a gritty, maybe low-scoring game. The weather is the main reason why I have them top 10, but they are talented enough where they could offer a safe floor week in, week out, regardless of opponent. But Broncos versus Chiefs and Chiefs at Denver, I think that game is low-scoring, but I don't know if you're getting like enough turnovers to really move the needle with either defense. But maybe it does work out. I think the Broncos win the game, so that's my tiebreaker, but both I think are top 10, both worth starting, high floor with both of them. And then the Panthers at Atlanta, the Falcons offense doesn't scare you too much, but Bijan and Algier could go nuclear, so could London. So there is some risk. I think the Falcons will win. So I think the Panthers hold their own, but in the dome, there's no weather to benefit them. So just a floor play, not elite upside. Eagles versus Detroit, back-to-back with the Lions. That game, I think, is a sneaky low score, but is also more likely a shootout. So there's some heavy risk, but if you watch the Eagles defense last week, they looked amazing. And against the Lions, there is some turnover potential. I could see Jared Goff have a stinker. So Eagles at home, I think, are getting the win here. I think they're a safe defense. They have such good personnel rest of season, even though their schedule's not good. Even against Detroit this week, I still think they have decent starting value as a floor play. But Lions, I think, will keep it close. So if it is a low-scoring game, it's because Aiden Hutchinson really gives Hurts some issues. I don't think the Lions will let Saquon run on them. Saquon going to have a rough game, more likely than not. So Lions, I think, are still kind of interesting, but also very risky. They are top 12, though. There's a lot of risk with everyone rest of the way. But maybe you trust the Steelers at home versus Joe Flacco. They had 6 turnovers last time they played a home game, and that was against the Colts. So the Bengals are a good offense, but could shit the bed. Steelers defense at home still kind of feels a bit tempting. But Bucks versus Bills, that game has terrible weather, but both offenses could go lights out. So some high risk, high reward. I think the Bucks eke out a win, so I have them one spot higher, but the Bills might get the home field advantage in bad weather. They might be the play. On defense, though, they have been bad overall. So not a big upgrade, but kind of good circumstances with the weather. They are top 15. And then the last defense I'm kind of considering is the Giants versus Green Bay, because Jordan Love doesn't impress you. The weather's going to be bad. And Jacobs has been really inefficient. Although the Giants can't stop the run, Jacobs is averaging like 3.2 yards per carry in most games this year. So Giants have some value, but I could also see the interim coach not put up a good game plan. They could also burn you really bad. At 16, odds are you're benching them. But the rest of the defenses I'm definitely benching. I don't like this Cardinals-Niners game. It could be a shootout, so I'll pass on them. But last time they played, it was 16-15. It could also be very low scoring. But the Niners defense is now depleted with injury. And then last week, the Cardinals defense looked like dog shit also with a lot of injuries. So I don't want to bet on them. I'll fade them, but in division, it could be interesting. And then the Seahawks and Rams defenses are better, but that game is more likely a shootout. So all four teams in the NFC West in this tier 17 through 20, a little tempting, but kind of feel too risky to bet on. Titans, Dolphins, Jags, Bears, and Vikings, 21 through 25. I think I'd bench. The Titans against Houston have not stepped up at all. Dolphins could be good. The humidity, though, is the only upside there. At least the Dolphins offense will play well, so I'm not dying to trust them. Chargers offense should be great. Jags secondary sucks. Don't start the Jaguars this week. And then the Bears Vikings game, I think, is a high scoring shootout. No thanks with them. I don't see much defense in that one, but perhaps I'm wrong. In division, I could be really underestimating the Vikings on defense. However, the offense for the Bears is pretty good. So no thanks with them. And then no fucking chance with the Commanders at Miami. They've been horse shit. The Bengals defense is dog shit. They did catch 2 picks on Rodgers last time, but in Pittsburgh, I'm not going to trust him. Cowboys Raiders, I think, is a high scoring game. Neither team has a good defense. And then the Jets at New England, I did tell you, were the worst defense on the week. So that's it for this video. Let's remind you of my rankings. Here on the screen are my top 24 at all 3 positions. And I honestly think there's a lot of risk factors at quarterback this week. The weather, I think, is a really annoying factor that will lead to diminished value on some big studs. Like, it shocked me to rank Allen, Lamar Jackson, and even Baker Mayfield this low this week. But I'm just worried about the wind. It's not going to be ideal. And I just think there's better matchups elsewhere. So if you have Justin Herbert, let's believe in this upgrade. The Jags are just such a good spot. Their secondary is so trash, and they also can't stop tight ends to save their life. So Herbert's going to dominate. I think he's going to play so well. I really think he's the quarterback 1 this week. But I was wrong on upgrading Drake Maye that high, but the projection on ESPN had him for like 26 points this week. So I wasn't the only one excited for Drake Maye. Travion just vultured him a little too much. But Caleb Williams gets a great matchup against the Vikings. I think he's going to really contribute in the run game as well. He's averaging 23 points against Minnesota in his career. I would expect something similar this week. So got to start him. He's on a heater. Hurts always in the lineup. The Lions are a top 10 matchup. Dak against Las Vegas off a bye. That's a must start. And then Darnold versus Stafford. If it wasn't in division, I would expect a shootout, but both defenses could step up, could limit each other a little bit. I could see some turnovers in this game. Otherwise, though, both quarterbacks might throw for 4 touchdowns and 300 yards. This game could be the game of the year. So I really want to start them. I think Mahomes against Denver will have capped upside, though. And then Flacco against Pittsburgh could also turn it over like crazy. In Pittsburgh, their defense sometimes wakes up. But those are all the quarterbacks I'd start over Allen, Baker, and Lamar. And those guys I think you still have to start if you have them. Their name value is too valuable. And odds are that Bucks-Bills game is still probably a shootout. You still probably get enough rushing stats to cover your ass. So good luck with them, but I would definitely trust the top 9 and start the top 12. But if you're looking to stream the position, my favorites are Tua, Brock Purdy, who you've been waiting for. I guess not a streamer, but off the IR slot, I guess maybe even off the wire, is a streaming option. McCarthy, I think, has really high upside this week. The Bears defense sucks, and he will run quite a bit this week, in my opinion. And then Geno and Rodgers get top 2 matchups, gotta believe in those upgrades a little bit. But it does feel gross to start them. I will acknowledge it feels very risky to rank them this high. But Bo Nix, I still think has a decent floor. Still going to give you at least 16 points against the Chiefs in division. So all these like streaming options, 13 through 18, I think all give you at least like 16, 18 points as a floor. But then I also think they have legit upside where, especially Tua and even Geno Smith, could easily go over 20 points. I like the upside a lot in this tier, but I don't like it as much for Davis Mills, Jacoby Brissett, and Mariota. They have high floors, but probably don't go over 17 points this week. Goff, Lawrence, and Love, I also think have a very capped upside. Don't like the matchups for them at all. Love's matchup's not bad, but the weather's gross and his receiving core is injured. I think it's just a good game for Josh Jacobs. But Winston is just outside the list here, and there is some upside for him. Justin Fields also played better than I thought. But at tight end, I think the top 9 are the only ones I'm trusting. And even once you hit number 7, it feels a bit gross to trust. I'm 100% thankful if I have McBride, Bowers, or Kittle in my lineup. If I picked up Gadsden, that's probably a league-winning asset. Goddard's been so good this year, so is Kelsey. I can't bench him. But once we hit Loveland, we're streaming the position. There is no safety net moving forward. And I know you probably think Jake Ferguson is a safe play, but the Raiders matchup is terrible. So let's fade him despite some season consistency. I like the upside for Theo Johnson and Loveland a bit more. Love Theo Johnson this week, especially with no Slayton. But if I'm streaming anyone off the wire, it's Zack Ertz. He's my preference. I like Cade Otton, but the matchup sucks in bad weather. It isn't that ideal. Hunter Henry gave you 6 points last night, so that's kind of what we're talking about. That's what I'm expecting from most of these players. Hoping for the floor, maybe a touchdown will bail you out elsewhere, but in general, these are the guys I would trust to just not burn you overall. And if you just want a touchdown, go for Dawson Knox with no Kincaid. He will have to step up. Ingram, I think, gives you at least 40 yards this week, so good floor play. Same with Sxhultz. Freiermuth and Greg Dulcich, though, have those elite matchups where I could see them really pop off in a touchdown, really give you that elite upside. So if you're willing to gamble, especially in DFS, go Freiermuth or Dulcich. Those guys are tempting, but no floor whatsoever. But less upside, still kind of tempting with Fant, Jonnu Smith, Terrence Ferguson, and Brenton Strange, but I think I'll fade them kind of too low in the ranks. And then I even have Andrews, AJ Barner, and Luke Musgrave as must benches this week. Same with Pitts and TJ Hawkinson in that tier. Not excited whatsoever. And then some wind is pretty gross elsewhere. No thanks with guys like Njoku, Fannin, Okonkwo. This week, I think that's not the way you should be going. But defense in the top 24, I'm really trusting the top 12 and then maybe considering the top 16. If you are forced to start defenses like Seattle and the Rams, then fine. But those are the last ones I'd even think about. I think it gets really gross outside the top 12. But Patriots, Ravens, and Texans felt like no-brainers this week. Packers against Jameis Winston have elite upside. Falcons, elite floor against Bryce Young, and then Chargers should be solid at Jacksonville. Browns against Baltimore scares me, but the weather is nice. That Broncos-Chiefs game should be low scoring, so they're tempting. And then Panthers at the Falcons, a division low scoring game, but maybe Bijan torches you. And then Eagles-Lions could actually be a shocker in terms of actual points. It might not be the shootout that you're expecting, but Steelers get a tough matchup. Bengals offense is good. Bucks, Bills might be a shootout. There is some risk. And then Giants get the weather to help them out. Jordan Love, not that impressive. So those are my ranks this week. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And that's going to be it for me. My name's Adam Rancho. I'll see you later with flex rankings at running back and wide receiver. Ring the notification bell if you don't want to miss out on that video. But I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Nice and blunt.